This is quite a long way. Anita, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for sparing the time, inviting me to say a few words this afternoon in Liverpool. Always good to be in Liverpool, place I've come to many times in my life. And I must say, when you come down to this redeveloped area here, it is fantastic to see what regeneration this city's gone through. I'm here really for two reasons today. I'm here actually to listen and to learn, because you know that I know nothing about the National Health Service. I've never worked in it. And secondly, as I'm here now at this moment, talk to you a little bit about change. Something that I've been involved with for a long time in my life, and it's actually the theme of your NHS Confederation challenge this year, the scale and nature of change needed to ensure a sustainable health and care system for the future. Now, as Anita told you, in February, the Secretary of State did ask me to do a piece of work on leadership in the health service and concentrating on what works and how we might better equip leadership for the challenges that are facing us, the challenges you've just heard about now, and so that we're better prepared to deliver a sustainable healthcare system for the future. Now, I aim to complete this work towards the end of this year and hopefully to suggest some practical and some positive ways that the service might focus on the enormous leadership challenges that it faces. I have spent the last 2 or 3 months listening and learning. I've visited a number of trusts. I've been to North Cumbria, I've been to Sherwood Forest, I've been to Basildon, I've been to Hampshire, I've been to see the people down at King's, amongst others. I've planned quite a few more visits during the next few months. I've met a wide number of managers at all levels of the business. I've met with CEOs, I've met with chairpersons, I've met with regulators, I've met with clinicians, I've met with matrons, I've met with sisters, porters and many others. I've had a session this morning with some trainees, and I've got a session this afternoon with some Band 8 and 7 and 8 managers. And I think the first thing that I want to say is I want to say thank you to all of them, because they've all been really open, they've been really honest and helpful. They've all been extremely generous with their time, and I know time is an extremely precious commodity to you. They've been very helpful with ideas, and they've been very, very patient with an outsider who has absolutely got a very limited knowledge of this service. But what really impressed me, and continues to impress me, as recently as last Thursday, Friday, when I was up in Cumbria, was the very real level of commitment and dedication that I have seen demonstrated by everyone that I have met in the service. I see a real desire to win, I see a real desire to excel, and I see a real passion for the service. Now, I often say that if you're somebody who knows nothing about something, it's actually a bit of an advantage sometimes, and I know nothing about this organisation, as I've said, but I have no axe to grind, and equally, I'm not embarrassed about asking stupid questions, and I'm not afraid of looking naive. Now, although at a superficial level my knowledge is limited, peeling back a few layers of the onion reveals some interesting parallels between the National Health Service and my ex-profession, actually it's still my current profession, retail. The National Health Service is the biggest employer in the public sector. Retail is the largest employer in the private sector. Marks & Spencer, one of my old employers, is one of the largest in the retail sector. And both the National Health Service and Marks & Spencer are national iconic brands. Both are very, very strong opinion formers, by which I mean that both have very strong emotional links with their users, patients or customers. Both interact with our daily lives. A huge number of people visit each every day and every week. And both are expected in their own way to provide fantastic service at the best possible value. And both, and this is important, are still trusted in this world where trust is an increasingly rare commodity. And both are what I call taxi driver businesses. Businesses about which people have very strong opinions. Unfortunately, most of those opinions are different, and therefore it makes life very, very hard if you're in those organizations and trying to run them. Because they are complex, because they both operate under the spotlight of constant scrutiny, whether it's press scrutiny or whether it's public scrutiny. Both have financial and regulatory constraints. Both are heavily people dependent. Both operate in an environment where only the highest standards are accepted. And both are operating in a world which is constantly changing, and one in which the rate of pace of change is accelerating. Now, on top of that, the National Health Service is, however, in my judgment, much, much, much harder to run. You face exceptional pressures, day in, day out. The relentless pressure of scrutiny from your patients, from the loved ones of your patients, and from the media outside. You have the responsibility daily, by the minute, for people's lives. You have the care of our loved ones in your hands. And you are at the center of the community, and you are daily really part of the fabric of the society of this country. Now, for many years, both these brands delivered incredible service, and still do deliver incredible service. And the standards that they themselves that delivered essentially remained unchanged. But the world, however, as I just said, was constantly changing. It's changing as it is now. It's changing economically. It's changing politically. It's changing socially. It's changing behaviorally. It's changing demographically. And it's changing massively in technology on a daily basis. Constant change. Now, change, as I said at the beginning, is a word that I've been associated with for a lot of my time in business. It's such an innocent little word, really. It's an ever-present word. It's one that has consequences. It's one that, sadly, is feared by most, although if you actually get it right and embrace it, it can be very exciting. It is inescapable. It's like a clock. You can't stop it. You can't fight it. And if you try and fight it, you will always lose. Fighting it is very wearing. Fighting it is self-defeating. Fighting it is demoralizing. But as I just said, embracing it can be liberating, can be energizing, can be rewarding, challenging, but exhausting, but rewarding. Now, I was just thinking about the changes that have happened in my own industry in the 40 years that I've been involved. And it's just worth stopping here for a couple of seconds to think about that. We used to have traditional stores. We were talking earlier on about those of you who'd been in the National Health Service for more than 40 or 50 years. Well, I go back more than 40. We had traditional stores. We had butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers. There were 100,000 independent butchers in the UK at that time. There are hardly any anymore today. We had departmental stores, which largely ruled the high streets. They're mostly gone today. We had food supermarkets in their infancy. Today, of course, they dominate the high street. Discounters, as we know them today, hardly existed, and yet you've seen probably from Tesco's results this morning the debates going on about how the Aldis and the Lidls of this world are at the one end pushing upwards and the value people at the other end are pushing upwards, but the middle market is becoming very difficult. We had a lot of regional players. There are hardly any regional players today. There was practically no international presence in those days. Today, there's massive international presence. The high street used to be king. Today, people are questioning whether bricks and mortar themselves are going to exist in retail in a few years' time. So it's constant change. And no one at that time had thought of e-commerce. No one had thought of e-tail or omni-channel or click and collect or showrooming, if you know what that is, or contactless payments or electronic wallets, or pure play retail, or indeed retailers who had no shops at all, like the ASOSs of this world, or the Ocadas of this world, or the Amazons of this world. And I could go on. The point I'm trying to make is it's a picture of constant change with nowhere to hide in a 24-hour real-time world where we actually live with instant news, blogs, social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc. Now, many things drive change, we all know that. But in my view, the primary driver of change that we are experiencing today is technology. The massive change in technology that we have had over the last, say, 100 years has seen the world change beyond recognition. Technology is embedded in every part of our daily lives. It's brought massive benefits to our daily lives, but it's also meant that we've had to constantly change and adapt to the new opportunities and new demands that it brings. Now, nowhere probably has that technological change had more impact than in the field of medicine. Technology has revolutionized the profession for both providers and for patients. Now, the same is true in retail, where channel shift to e-commerce has changed the way we shop forever, but in medicine, it's been massively impacting. Now, most of my career, I've been, mostly by accident actually, involved with change. I've worked in 4 or 5 businesses, and all of them, at one time or another, have got into some period of trouble. Mostly because they've all failed to spot, to see, or to understand what was going on. To see what was going on around them, they failed to listen, they failed to adapt, they failed to particularly adapt to the technical changes that I've just been talking about, and they failed to then to adapt to the changes that have followed as a consequence of that. In short, as my old boss used to say to me, Stuart, if you don't look out of the window every day, when you do, you'll find that when the world has passed you by. And why don't organizations change? Well, they don't change because often they don't see it as their problem. The individuals don't, perhaps. They don't see it as their responsibility because it is difficult, and it is difficult, because it upsets the status quo, because it can be very threatening, because it can be very uncomfortable, because they lack the leadership, or the vision, or the courage, or the insight, or the determination, or perm any one of those. But interestingly, in my experience, and it's happened in every one of the 5 businesses that I've worked in that have got into trouble, the organizations actually always know deep down somewhere that they are underperforming and that they have to change, or that other pressures are forcing them to do so. They just need a catalyst. They need a mechanism, they need an event, they need a trigger, they need something to change that, and they need the leadership to lead that change. Now, very, very sadly, mid-staff was such a catalyst, a very tragic and unnecessary one, but a catalyst nevertheless, and one that triggered very real and beneficial changes that are now improving care and outcomes for patients everywhere. That catalyst released the will and the know-how to change things. The knowledge that came from within the system, from amongst those people, in the center, in the thick of it, doing the work, seeing, feeling the pressures, the physical pressures, the financial pressures, and the emotional pressures that caused the problem in the first place. Now, the trick of leadership is to know how to release and harness that pressure in a positive way. To trust the organization to recognize the problems and find the solutions, mostly from within inside, if you can, whilst responding to the differences in style, perspective, background, and geography that we all operate in. Leadership, which is about releasing the energy and imagination, requires an open mind. It requires a lack of selfishness, an ability to draw and drive consensus, always remembering that patients come first. Also always remembering that no business or organization is bigger than the individual, and there's absolutely no place for self-interest. Now, recognizing that progress and improvement come from creating an atmosphere of trust and the ability to identify the things that really matter, and the establishment of a can-do culture is essential in doing this. So change is about identifying the problems and developing a plan. It's about developing a plan, but it's also about syndicating a plan. It's about implementing that plan when you've syndicated it with speed. It's about delegating that plan within a framework and with accountability. It's about sticking to the plan, unless, of course, after some time, evidence shows that it's not working. It's about celebrating. It's about sharing success. It's about sharing success up and down the structure. It's about cooperating. It's about collaborating both vertically and horizontally. And all the time, it's about remaining patient-focused, customer-focused, and open-minded. And one way I think is best described, to describe it, is possibly it's about having restless dissatisfaction, knowing that perfection is impossible, but always striving to do the right thing. Now, we all know, because you're all involved in it, and I've been involved in it myself, change is never easy. It does require courage. It does require enormous amounts of energy, and I know you're all very energetic. It does require imagination. It also requires stubbornness, and it requires determination. Now, a leadership role, at whatever level you're operating at, is also a very lonely role. To be that leader, at whatever level you're leading, is to accept the pressure and to accept that loneliness, to accept the risk of failure, but also, if you get it right, to savor the immense sense of achievement that successful change brings, knowing that the team that you lead, in a way, clearly demonstrates that 1 + 1 + 1 equals more than 3. Now, interestingly for me, too often I think people confuse leadership with management. All leaders can manage, but not all managers can lead. Good managers lead teams. No one individual can have the knowledge, the skills, the insight, the energy to effect change without the backing and support that energy that teamwork brings. Teamwork is essential to manage change. That is what ensures that great businesses or systems, such as the National Health Service, stay ahead of the curve, re-energized, revitalized, refreshed, and renewed, providing day in, day out quality, value, service that is not only demanded, but that your patients deserve. Service that you're rightly proud of giving, and I know you'll continue to do so, and being trusted to deliver. Thank you.